Nanu Nanu, and welcome back. I'm John Stark from ActMovieGuy.com. Thanks for subscribing to my channel. I'm sure you did that. If you didn't do that, why don't you do that right now? You can just click subscribe. It's literally right there. There's a subscribe button. And then we can jump into this review of Interstellar, which, interestingly enough, was not on Max. I just kind of assumed all of Christopher Nolan's movies were on Max. This is on Amazon right now. Ooh. Of course, things move around all the time. I don't know. When you watch this video, who knows? It could be on a brand new streaming service. I have no idea where you'll find this, but it has audio description. And that's why I watched it, because it has audio description, and I hadn't seen it for a while. I'm trying to catch up on these Nolan films. It's a very Nolan time. And this film is described by Tansy Alexander. So shout out to Tansy on her narration. And we're going to jump into Interstellar. So I had the fortunate ability to see Interstellar in theaters. I actually own the Blu-ray somewhere. Don't even look for my Blu-rays. But I do own this on Blu-ray. I don't know. I watch it on Amazon. So I saw this in theaters and on Blu-ray. I think this was my third time. I'm gonna guess. Might only be my second. But there were some shots that I remembered that I was like, I think I've seen this movie at least twice to be able to remember some of these scenes rather well. Usually a movie I've only seen once, I don't remember that well visually. But there are some scenes that kind of stood out to me. But it features Matthew McConaughey teaming up with Christopher Nolan, which I think is such an interesting pairing. You know, so many people make fun of McConaughey. You know, all right. And you don't think that he would be the kind of actor that Nolan would choose. But I think that's where Nolan's strengths lie, are in sometimes subverting your expectations. There was a lot of backlash when he initially chose the guy from Brokeback Mountain to be the Joker. You know, like everybody's like, ugh, I can't believe this is happening. This is terrible. You know, I'm pretty certain Christian Bale was not the leading choice to play Batman, by the way. He likes to change it up and pick different people for things, but also Michael Caine a lot. Michael Caine's in this too, along with Anne Hathaway, who he also worked with on The Dark Knight Rises, Jessica Chastain, Topher Grace is in this. I know that sounded like a question, but I actually totally had forgotten Topher Grace was in this. When I heard his voice, I was like, Topher Grace? Good for you. I didn't know he worked with Nolan. To this point, the most impressive thing I thought he did was BlacKkKlansman, but I guess he's also worked with Nolan. So now he's worked with Chris Nolan and Spike Lee. Good for him. Wes Bentley is in here, but he's worked with some impressive directors. He's not just Yellowstone, but this is pre-Yellowstone days. Just a lot of really interesting, recognizable talents. John Lithgow, and I guess it's a spoiler that Matt Damon's in this, but at this point, I don't really think it is. I mean, they tried to hide that in the marketing, that later on Matt Damon would pop up, but I mean, you could put him on there. It's really not that surprising. I mean, when you look at Nolan films, especially everything I've heard about Oppenheimer and the massive cast list now, it's becoming pretty regular that he has a depth of cast. So he might have somebody pop up in a scene who's just there for like 5 seconds, you know, who's like, hey, what's up, guys? I'm here and I'm done. It was a day's work, but I'm in a Christopher Nolan movie and I'm done now. And that could have been something that Damon was doing. There's no reason really to hide his part. You discover the movie for yourself how he plays into it. I don't think the fact that he was in this should have been a surprise. I think that's a bit of a stretch. marketing wise. Like, oh my god, Matt Damon's in this? That should not be the twist. Um, so it features, this one is the better of the Nolan films where Nolan is playing around with the concept of time. He's done this with Interstellar, and he was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to the table with Tenet, and we're going to do this again. I don't think Tenet was as successful as Interstellar is in being able to navigate sort of scientifically through time. Tenet is sort of like a fantastical movement through the concept of time. It feels more like less scientific, less realistic, and more like a Back to the Future version, like where we're like, ooh, look, we can do time travel. Look at us, we're cool now. Look what we can do. Whereas Interstellar is like, all right, let's get into the science of this and make sure we get this right. Like, I feel like Nolan and his brother Christopher and Jonathan Nolan both had like advice from actual scientists on a lot of the concepts and theories that they're bringing up in here about wormholes and how they could possibly work, and it's really interesting to see how everything comes together. If you have never seen Interstellar, I'm going to try to avoid as many spoilers as possible, because I actually think this is a film worth watching at least once in your life, just simply to see how Christopher Nolan connects beginning to end. It really, I don't think it's my favorite Christopher Nolan film, but at the same time, I know it's not my favorite Christopher Nolan film. It's not even in my top 3 or 5. But a lot of that has to do with the runtime. It does kind of feel like it is long. It feels like it's, but I also don't know what I would cut. But it is a film that you feel the runtime. It was a film that I was in it and I was like, damn, I'm still in this movie. But at the same time, I'm thinking back and I'm like, where would I cut? I guess I would cut from the very beginning. But I'm sort of pro character building, because I think we have to understand relationships and character building. We do spend maybe a little bit more time at the front than we need to, but I don't know. It's tough. It's really tough to decide how would you make this shorter? And for people who are looking at, questioning, should I watch 3-hour Oppenheimer? This is 2 hours and 50 minutes. This is 10 minutes shorter. So if you can't make it through this, then I don't know. I don't know. So figure it out. If you want to know what long Christopher Nolan feels like, it feels like this. But he does get some really great performances out of his actors, and the audio description translates really well. And I'm going to highlight a couple of scenes out of context that I haven't really told you what the film is about, because I want you to discover it for yourself. It's really weird because this film's been out since 2014. So it's almost at that point where I feel like I could spoil it. But I respect the film enough not to. I want to talk about some of the scenes that I remembered. And that the audio description, specifically Tansy Alexander's audio description, really brought back to me and helped me and did such a wonderful job with. There's all this stuff that happens in Murph's bedroom in the beginning. Young Murph with the dust and the books and everything, and then the dust settling and it settling in a pattern. I thought all of that was described really well, and it's really integral to the plot and the story. It sort of sets him on his journey. It sets McConaughey's coupe on his journey, and sends him to a place. It's very interesting how that happened, how everything just sort of landed perfectly. And then when you see it in the end, you're like, wow, okay, so that's how that happened. And it's interesting the choices that were made. And yeah, this is really an interesting film to watch probably twice, because you'll go back through and you'll be like, wait a minute, what? So that's definitely a scene for me that I really enjoyed, the audio description explaining how the dust worked in that scene, and some of the books that fall out of the shelf and stuff like that. So that was really good. But probably my favorite scene happens to be, because it's so iconic and I actually remember it, and it's such a testament to Matthew McConaughey's acting. Is there's a scene where McConaughey, he finally sort of gets an update. I think it's the second time in the film. I don't think it's the third. I think he only gets an update twice from his family. And he gets this update. His family can send him messages, and he's getting these updates. And he's just like uncontrollably sobbing. And I remember watching that, and it was so emotionally effective in theaters visually when I saw it, when I could still see that it was so moving. It was probably the most moving part of the film, was watching McConaughey realize what these videos meant, and everything that he had missed, all of the things that were gone that he could never get back, all for this one trip, this one chance at saving humanity by trying to find a sustainable planet for us to live on. And it's sort of like Lightyear tried to do something similar to this. It just doesn't have the emotional impact. They kind of missed that boat. It's been played with in other films. 65 kind of has a version of this, where Adam just keeps pulling up the video of his daughter's testimonies. And it's not like it's a universally unique idea that Nolan came up with. It's actually McConaughey's acting that really just, it brings it on home. It's just a fantastic scene, and the description of it was tremendous. There's also these various descriptions of these planets that they go to that are very Earth-like, obviously, because they were likely shot on Earth, so just in super specific areas with probably some visual effects. Chris Nolan really does like practical effects as much as humanly possible. It's hard for him to shoot in space without using some visual effects, though. It's really hard for him to do that without some visual effects. So I think he probably definitely used some, but a lot of this would have been practical. He just prefers practical effects. So even this is a long review. Even the Inception thing where they're rotating, that's practical. I know you wouldn't think it's practical where the building is rotating and they're doing the fight, but they built that. That's a rig that they built so that they could have that fight rotate. Anyway, so yes. So he really loves practical effects. So the description of these foreign planets were really cool as well. I really love the film. I love how it ends. I love how the score is beautiful. It's beautiful in sort of almost an understated way. A lot of Nolan's scores are very bombastic because they accompany these larger-than-life films like The Dark Knight and Inception. And they feel like they're, almost overtaking you, like everything is overwhelming. Whereas Interstellar could be overwhelming, but the score chooses mostly to lay back and almost embrace the beauty of what's happening and the moments and the possibilities. It's a very different type of score, and yet it still feels like the score Christopher Nolan would use. Nolan always finds the best people to work with in his films, which is one of the reasons. It's like he is a great director himself, but you can see as his career grows why his films keep getting better and better, is that better and better people want to work with him. So he ends up finding, the right cinematographer. He ends up finding the right production design, and he gets better people to write his scores, and so on and so forth. It's like when he started out with Memento, that was basically all on him. Nobody knew who he was. Best thing he could get was like a couple of decent actors to do his script, and he directed the hell out of it, but he didn't really have the team yet because people didn't know who he was. Nobody had seen Following. And that Memento kind of propelled him in a way. Then Insomnia was good, and then he did Batman Begins, and he finally started getting the right people, and he assembled a team, and it's this team that he seems to put together. Tim Burton kind of has a lot of the same people he likes to work with. That's what really sends it through, is that Nolan has figured out the totality of what it is that he wants from his final product. It's not just his directing, it's not just the look, it's not just that he understands the concept and the plot and how to direct his actors, but he understands what it needs to sound like, what it needs to look like, and how to finish the film in just a fantastic way. I think Interstellar is going to be probably one of the more slightly underrated titles of his career, simply because as we progress and as he directs more films, I don't know that it has nearly the passion behind it that some of his other films have. I think it's going to be like The Prestige, where there's going to be people who are like, I really love this. This is one of my favorite Nolan films. But for me, I picked The Prestige over Interstellar, but like barely. I really love Interstellar. I just happen to love a lot of Nolan films. For me, the only time that he really ever tripped up was Tenet. And other than that, Following feels like a concept to me, feels like a proof of concept. Like, look at what I could do if you gave me more money. It doesn't really feel like a complete film. It's barely over an hour. So I don't ever need to see Following again in my lifetime. So, everything else I love. I think Insomnia is great. So many great shots in Insomnia. He's a fantastic director, and I really enjoyed revisiting Interstellar for the umpteenth time. Probably the one performance, if I really had to nail it down, that I think missed out on the nomination was Matthew McConaughey. I think there are some solid moments from everybody. I think Anne Hathaway has definitely some really good moments here, but it's hard to not say Matthew McConaughey. I love the robot in this too, by the way. I love how the robot helps and the dynamic in that whole thing. But yeah, this is just a testament to the fact that Matthew McConaughey, we counted him out as being just the goofy stoner guy from Dazed and Confused for some reason, but he's actually really the McConaissance or whatever it's called. It's really is real. It's happening. So that's my favorite part of the film, is him just sobbing. So a really good job from the narration team, from Tansy Alexander and the team at Deluxe. And I'm going to give Interstellar an A-. It's one of the few, it's probably maybe the only film I would do that to. And it's only because I can feel the runtime, and I feel like Nolan has a shorter version of it, but I'm not even really sure how much shorter it could be. 5 minutes. But sometimes tighter is still tighter. And acknowledging the fact that I felt the runtime here, whereas with some of his other films that have broken the 2-hour mark and gone closer to 2.5 hours, they fly by. Dark Knight flies by for me. I don't ever feel that runtime. So I just feel it, and that's the thing that keeps it from being an A film like many of his other films, is the fact that I was like, oh, I'm still in this film. Yep, I'm still here. This is still happening. Okay. So, anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I hope you check out Interstellar and the rest of Nolan's works. And I have a website you can check out, MacTheMovieGuy.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at MacTheMovieGuy. You can go to the audio description project at adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what has audio description and where you can watch it. And you can go to the ADNA.org. That's the ADNA.org. It'll let you know more about Tansy Alexander and the other films that she's done. That's it for me today. I will review something else for you guys and see you on the other side.